I'm going to start implementing my roles by starting on the database end, so by adding these roles, setting them up in the database. For this to work, I will need 3 tables. I already got one, which is the user table, which holds the users. Of course, I will have a table holding the roles. And then the 3rd table will hold, well, kind of the matches, which basically will hold a user ID and a role ID to match users with roles, because this will be a many-to-many relationship. One user may have multiple roles, and one role can of course be assigned to multiple users. Therefore, we need 3 tables. I'm going to use the artisan command to do this. So in my terminal video, I'm going to write PHP artisan make model, and first I want to create a role model, -m to also create the migration file. As you can see, this added this role PHP file, this model file here, and it added this migration file. Let's start with the migration. This is the, well, boilerplate Laravel created for us, and I will need 2 additional fields here. Both will be string fields, a name of the role, and, well, though this isn't really used in this application, to be honest, a description, just to show how you could configure your role. So this is all I need for the migration file here. The next thing is I want to go to my role.php model file here, and I will set up the relation of this role to the user. And this will just be a public function, which I will call users, because it's many users, and it will return this belongs to many app user. This is the relation because, as I said, my role may assign to many users, therefore it belongs to many users. On the other hand, in the user model here, I will, well, basically define the same, but it is called roles, and this will be return this belongs to many and then app role. Now we got this many-to-many relationship set up. The next step is to set up this matching table, this 3rd table I was talking of. So again, back in the command line here, I'm going to write PHP artisan make migration, and then I will call this create user role table. As you see, this created this file here, this migration file, and inside this file I'll have to write a little bit more than in the other migration files, but I'm just going to copy this here from my role migration file. Down here I'll have schema drop, and the table will be called user role. Here, of course, too, user role. I will have, well, increments, timestamps, that is fine. However, here I will have an integer, which will be called user ID. And I just copied this line because I'll have the same for, well, the role ID. The naming here is important because Laravel will look for a table called user role, and it will also look for user and role ID in this table when we actually use this relationship we set up in our model files here through Laravel's eloquent model. So this is very important to understand. Now you could change this default behavior by, when creating this relationship, adding additional parameters here, where you could say, and let's actually do this even though it's not necessary here, you could say, okay, the matching table is called user role. That's just the name I gave this table here. And as I said, Laravel will infer this name by default, but if you have another table name, that's no problem, just specify it as an extra parameter. And then as an additional parameter, you can say, well, the foreign key here, in this case, will be, well, user ID. Also, you might say, well, the other key of my role will be role ID. Now I'm just going to copy all this, and in my role model file, I'll insert this. And of course, this has to be changed here in this order. So that's very important to understand, to get right. As I said, it wouldn't have been necessary here because that is the default Laravel infers, but whenever you change names, this is the way to set it up. So with this out of the way, the next thing I want to do is I want to seed some data. I want to create some default roles, which are always there when we start or create our application. So as I already got my user table seeder, which sets up my users, I will create a new seeder for, well, my roles. And I will again, do this in the command line here where we're typing php artisan make seed, and then I will just call this role table seeder. And the name is purely up to you here. So now this seeder here was added, and as you can see, it's just an empty function here, a run function. And inside this function, I will create the code which I want to run through upon seeding, or well, yeah, when I basically run the seed command in the Artisan command line interface. What I actually want to seed here is I will, well, say we have the role for a normal user, which will be a new role. And I will import it at the top. So we will use app role so that I can just write new role here. And well, this role user, this user role, will have a name of, let's say, user. And it will have some kind of description, and I will just write a normal user. And thereafter I will save this. Now I'm going to quickly copy this and create two new users. The first one will be my offer user here, role offer, and it will be called offer. And here the description will be an offer. And then I will have my admin, that was the wrong key. I will have my admin here, role admin, so that we get the 3 roles we need for our application to work. Now the last thing is in the database seeder file here, I will, well, basically uncomment it here because I already wrote it, but we have to call the role table seeder and then thereafter the user table seeder. Now the order here is important because I'm going to change the user table seeder in a second, because in the user table seeder where we set up our users, I also want to assign some basic roles to them. I'm currently not doing that, but I will do in a second. Therefore, it's important to first create the roles so that we can then use them in the user table seeder, which I'm doing now. Assigning roles is pretty easy. First, I'm going to retrieve my 3 roles by just saying, well, accessing the database through Eloquent, so with the role model. And here just say, well, my user model is where the name equals user. That's the name we just defined. And here I will get the first role, and I know I only have one, so this will fetch the only role I have, the only user role. Now, of course, this will change to role offer here, and here it will be role admin, and here I need to make these changes too. So this retrieves the roles, and now to assign them to a user is super simple. Laravel allows me to do the following. I can access the user I'm creating here, or I already created and saved, and the order is important here again. It has to be saved to the database so that Laravel can actually create the relation. Because remember, we have this third table where we have the role ID and user ID. Laravel can only create an entry in this table which defines the actual relation if we have a role as well as a user in the database, because it needs the IDs of the user and the role. So we have to save the user and therefore write it to the database before assigning a role and hence creating the relation. That's very important, and I hope it's clear why. So what I'm doing here is I access the roles relation with parentheses here because we're still in the query. I'm not accessing it as a property where I then want to, let's say, loop through all the roles this user has, but instead I want to kind of create a join statement if we were to translate this into SQL. So I use parentheses to say, now connect the user with the roles table here, And then I use the attach method Laravel provides me with the eloquent model. And this allows me to attach a role, because I'm accessing roles here, to this user. And the role I want to attach is role user. Now, of course, attach doesn't only work with roles and users. It would be the same behavior if you have posts and comments, for example. This basically just says or tells Angular Laravel that to create a relation and to create this entry I was just talking about in this third table. Now I just copied this here to my admin, where I'm going to assign role admin, and finally to my author here at the bottom, where I assign role author. Okay, so now let's write all the data to the database by running php artisan migrate --seed to also run the seeding after the tables have been created. Looks good. And now what I did here, or what I do have here is I have my, well, this is SQL Pro, which allows me to connect to my database and have a look at the contents. And as you can see, I got my roles, user roles and users table. In the users table, I got my free users. In the roles table, I got the free roles I set up. And in the user role table, you can see I got the assignments of user 1 has role 1. And if we have a look, user 1 is the normal user, not the admin, not the author. And it has the role 1, which is the normal user role. So this works. This is how we set up our database, how we seed the data. And in the next part, we'll have a look at, well, the actual work, how we protect our middleware and how we restrict access based on these roles we just set up. See you there. Bye.